Matt doesn't like things that are ambiguous.
That's not my complaint at all.
I can lead you astray, straight to hell if you like. Give me a big black box and I can open your eyes. Are we keeping it real? Are we keeping it tight? Are we all just victims of our infinite life?
Welcome back to EnterTheRealWorld.com. This is There Will Be Movies, where myself, Matt Waters, and Ben Phillips go through 25 of our favourite movies from a given decade, starting with Volume 1, controversially, 2000 to 2009. And Ben, how are you on this fine day? Nice and hungover?
Nice and hungover.
Yeah.
I shouldn't go at people who just want to buy me wine.
Never do that. It's a giant red flag. It's not at all. Episode 14, we are doing Pan's Labyrinth, aka El Labirinto del Forno. The whole Pan thing,
Pan
only for the English language.
Because I think Fawn's Labyrinth would confuse many people.
Why? Well, Pan isn't a thing that the average person has like a cultural cachet for.
I don't know. I just imagine if they call it a fawn, they're just going to think of fucking Danny DeVito from Hercules.
Or Mr. Tumnus.
Or Mr. Tumnus. the other famous fawn.
Which is fitting given what this movie is. This was put on our list by you. I acknowledge that for a large portion of my life I was a little bit contrarian-y, and the more people were like, this fucking movie, I was like, ugh. So it's better than I spent a good portion of my life saying it is, but I think it's just good and that's it. Whereas for some people this is like transcendent filmmaking and like one of the best movies ever made, and I'm like, you're crazy. But for you, perhaps
I'm not going to go that strong. I think this is one of my favourite movies of the decade. I think this does a lot of things that I love about Guillermo del Toro. I think it's easily his best movie. I know people love Blade 2 and The Hellboys and Pacific Rim.
People should not love Blade 2. Sorry, I can't do it again, but keep going.
And it feels like when he made Shape of Water, a lot of that movie winning Best Picture is kind of an apology. Because, obviously, Pacific Rim and Crimson Peak kind of, steer away from it. But you've got this kind of, Hellboy, Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy 2, Shape of Water, his Doug Jones kind of series of movies.
Keeping him in work.
Was Doug Jones in...
Pacific.
Oh, he's in Mimic as well, yeah. I was trying to remember.
Yeah, he's in Mimic.
And he is
That's why he got the job on this, yeah. I wrote, directed, and directed by Guillermo del Toro, but it's written and directed is what I was going for there. And you've kind of covered it there, like his other movies that came out in this decade. Due to the rules of this podcast, both the Hellboys are disqualified on two grounds, really. One, I guess it counts as... We said no capes, no superhero movies, even though there's no capes in that movie or whatever. And two, it was already covered. Mike and I did Hellboy 1 and 2 on this podcast. Go find that. If you're listening on SoundCloud or whatever, it's under the Best of the Rest playlist, because we couldn't come up with a name for a 2-episode series.
Because you guys are comic illiterate in terms of Hellboy. You read the Hellboy comics, they're really good.
I have been very tempted. I saw some Hellboy comics.
They are sexy. The library editions are so gorgeous and wonderful.
I've got to read my sweet, sweet Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics first. There are 22 or 26 volumes of that, and I'm on volume 6, so I'll be a while with that.
There's only 11 volumes of Hellboy.
Don't say it only when there's 11. Blade 2, of course, also disqualified, and also it fucking sucks, I think. But Devil's Backbone I've never seen. Have you seen Devil's Backbone?
I've not seen Devil's Backbone. I must say I've not seen a lot of his 90s stuff.
Okay, well, I've seen Mimic. That's quite good. I learned that Devil's Backbone, this is essentially a sequel to Devil's Backbone, and he's the characters from it are in this, and yeah.
It's very much like Themes.
Spanish Civil War with a supernatural thing happening to the side that may or may not be real, but probably is real. There you go.
So which characters cross over?
I think some of the rebels in this are supposed to be grown-up versions of the kids from the orphanage in Devil's Backbone.
Okay.
Yeah, so released October 2006 in Spain and Mexico, a few weeks apart. November of 2006 in the UK. I actually couldn't find a US release date. It's got to have been around October, November, though. I can't believe they were that far behind, even if it had a limited showing.
18th of December.
Wow, okay. So
with a limited release on the 29th of December.
Yes.
So this skated in very, very at the last minute to get nominated for the Oscars.
Yeah. Although I think, even though it had such a limited release, due to the size of America, it actually showed on more screens in America than anywhere else, but it was still such a tiny release if you look at most films that release in America. So we've discussed 2006 twice in terms of films, so there's not really a lot to go on, but Ben, if you want to talk about Pan's Labyrinth sort of opening week to month or whatever.
Yeah, so it opened 24th of November in the UK. It earned about $600,000 at the UK box office, putting it at number 8. It was the 5th highest grossing new movie of the month or the week, behind Santa Claus 3, Tenacious D, A Pick of Destiny, Jackass 2, and Doom 2, a Bollywood movie, I believe.
That's not good, is it?
No, it's not. And that even then, number 1 and number 2 movies at the box office that week were Borat at number 2, earning about $3 million, and Casino Royale, number 1, with a whopping $16.5 million in its second week.
Well, I feel like Del Toro's name didn't start carrying weight until this had already come out, and most people have missed it.
Yeah, I think this is the movie where Del Toro becomes like an auteur, because obviously a lot of his stuff before this was like people liked Hellboy and they liked Blade.
But I feel even with those, you didn't know he was involved almost. It's like, yeah, it's this Hellboy movie. It's not like, oh yeah, Del Toro who made Hellboy. I feel that did take effect for Hellboy 2 because of Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, like you look at Hellboy 2 and Hellboy 2 is basically a Del Toro movie.
Yes.
Like Hellboy very much pulls from the comics a lot more, whereas Hellboy 2 is very much like, well, what if I just do my same creature designs and basically port over the design team from Pan's Labyrinth?
His golden elves and his pixies and his, all that stuff.
Like, didn't he decide not to do a Pan's Labyrinth sequel to go do Hellboy 2?
You are reading straight from my notes. Yes, he did turn down making a sequel that was called like 3077 or something like that to make Hellboy 2. So
yeah, and then he spends five years trying to make a Hobbit movie, walks off, and then does the big fighty robot movie. He
does Evangelion live action. It is 119 minutes long, so nice and breezy, especially compared to The Departed. A tiny budget of $19 million, made $83 million though, so still a profitable movie, even if quite small. He was actually offered at least twice the budget to make it in English by American studios, and he kept turning them down. Good for him, but it does.
Yeah, no, I think this movie completely would fall flat if it was made in English somewhere else. I think what makes this so special is, I mean, obviously he's from Mexico, he's not from Spain, but
which became a bit of a political thing as well. I think some of the Spanish studios were talking some shit to him, and he's like, "Well, you're Mexican, so you don't get it." And it's like, okay, dude, calm the fuck down. And yeah, he wrote the subtitles himself because he very much did not like some of the subtitles that had been done for his work in the past, and yeah, he had to give up his entire salary and back-end profits to get it made, but it obviously has made him a far more in-demand filmmaker, so I am sure there is not an ounce of regret there. But yeah, this was very much his passion project.
It's interesting though, because he's very much one of those people who he doesn't get a lot of projects made.
No, I feel he's attached to a million things and none of them ever happen.
Yeah, like I think he is probably the most exacting filmmaker that we've done so far. Like, he's not Martin Scorsese, who, like, I think the movie After Hours was set up to be Tim Burton and like a big breakthrough for Tim Burton, but he basically like gave the script to Martin Scorsese because he was so frustrated that he wasn't able to make Last Temptation of Christ. So like Martin Scorsese, like, I think the movie got shut down, so Martin Scorsese was just like, I need to make a movie, I can't not make a movie. Whereas Guillermo del Toro is perfectly happy to spend 5 years behind the scenes on The Hobbit and then not make them in the end.
Yeah, I think he's just so invested. He's like constantly living in this world in his own head kind of thing, that like I think he considers all of his movies his life's work kind of thing, rather than each one its own. I don't know. Yeah, I just feel he's more creatively satisfied because he's always thinking about it.
Yeah, I do want to see his movie of like In the Mountains of Madness. Like that I think feels like a dream project for him, but we'll see if anyone ever wants to make it, let him make it. Del Toro is someone who doesn't want to be artistically compromised.
No,
and
yeah, that's when he gave when he turned down the American money. He was like, I want it to be about the movie, I don't want it to be dictated by the market and stuff.
Yeah, and I think the two movies that kind of are his most pure efforts, like, are Pan's Labyrinth and Shape of Water, and they're the two that have
the most
gone on to massive critical acclaim. Yeah, like Shape of Water, it's not my favourite movie that was nominated for the Oscars that year, but it is a wonderful movie.
I totally understood it without subtitles. So Del Toro famously keeps these notebooks that he's spent like decades writing and doodling in, that are just full of his like bizarre ideas that he has in a good way. So this came out of that, as did several of his movies. In particular, he had a lot of lucid dreams as a child about a faun emerging from behind a grandfather clock, and that is what got him going with this. He pitched the movie out loud to Sergi Lopez, who plays Vidal. He was talking to him for 2.5 hours, and he's like, yeah, this sounds great, show me a script. And he's like, oh, I haven't written any of it. And then he wrote it, and it was like exactly the same. So there you go. He turned down making the Chronicles of Narnia to do this, which is basically his own version of the Chronicles of Narnia, in my opinion. But he was at one point circled as someone they wanted to do that Chronicles of Narnia movie. Did it come out this same year, or was it the year before? I think it was the year before.
It must have been the year before. I think it was 2005's Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah, okay. And as you said, he chose not to do the sequel because he was going to do Hellboy 2. And my final piece of trivia before we get going, Bjork wrote the song Pneumonia immediately after seeing this movie. So listen to Pneumonia on loop and then listen to us talk about the movie. So this is set in Spain shortly after the Spanish Civil War. It's set in 1944, and the narration at the beginning tells us of a princess escaping from the underground realm only to die in the human world, and her father, the king, believed her soul would one day return. So right off the bat, you have Del Toro's like obsession with, I don't want to call them like alternative fairy tales, but you know, sort of the grimdark style of fairy tale, and he is obsessed with mythology and these kind of European folk tales and that kind of stuff. And it's a very, I don't know, it's a little bit abstract, that little opening animation sequence, but it's certainly very intriguing, and you're like, oh, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
We then move to Ophelia and her pregnant mother travelling out to the countryside to live with her new stepfather, a fascist army captain, Vidal, just the nastiest guy in the world. And along the way, she finds like a little boulder which she puts into a statue, and then a strange stick insect comes out, and it's like following her around, and then it transforms into a fairy and leads her to a nearby labyrinth. But I think, apologies up front for pronunciations of names, but if I am saying this right, Ivan Baquero is one of the best child actresses I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah, she's fantastic. I know she won some awards. She won the BAFTA for...
Yes.
Or no, was it the... No, it was a Saturn Award for Best Performance by a Younger Actress, which, I mean, obviously
what
is
a
like...
category.
I know, one of those highly specific things. But, like, no, she's fantastic. And...
Yeah, this whole thing falls apart if she's not there to hold it together, and she is really, really good throughout. But yeah, just right from the jump, I think she's great. Sergi as Vidal, just a complete nasty piece of work. And
I think he is probably one of the best villains of the 2000s. I don't think, just really well kind of like sculpted villain. Like, you completely hate him, but they do that extra thing to kind of like shade in why he might be as kind of fundamentally nasty as he is. Like, the whole backstory with the watch is not enough that you'd like sympathize with him, but enough to go like, oh no, this guy's just got a fucking massive chip on his shoulder because his father wanted to show him what a real man was like. Mm-hmm. Like, what a fucking like big fuck you to be like, he smashed his watch on a rock to let him know what time a real man died.
It's super fucked up. Sergio Lopez is kind of not really known for his dramatic work in Spain, and the producers told Del Toro outright, like, you shouldn't cast him, he will not give you what you need, you don't get it because you're Mexican, etc, etc. And big fuck you to all of them, because I think he fucking killed it, and I think he said it's like his favourite role he's ever played, and like, it's just just a purely evil, irredeemable man. And like you said, yeah, I think it is one of the like unsung villainous performances in cinema. There's just so many like little touches as well, stuff like, you know, like when the doctor warns him that she shouldn't have travelled so late in her pregnancy, and he just doesn't give a shit because he doesn't care about her, he cares about the child.
Oh yeah, like a son should be born where his father is.
Yes. And something that doesn't really translate for us, but thanks to the world of movie trivia, he uses a Spanish greeting that applies when there's at least one male present in the party. So he is gendering the entire arriving group due to the unborn child inside of Ophelia's mother. So it's like, wow. It just really shows you where his head is at, that he should be using a different one. But...
I think my favourite, because obviously he's got a lot of kind of like very dismissive lines about his wife, but the one that always always gets me is when they're sat at the dinner table.
Yeah, and he's
with
like,
all the...
she doesn't know that people don't want to hear these kinds of stories.
Like, she's literally asked to her face, like, what is the story of how you met Captain Vidal? And he's just like, oh, God, I can't believe she spent 2 sentences describing the story of how we met.
It instinctively kind of bothers me a bit, this trope of, like, husband who clearly, like, fucking hates his wife, but it's like, I get that this was very much a thing that happened for a long time in the entire history of marriage, but I'm like, oh, this is just comical, the amount that he has no interest in her whatsoever, and she's like, oh, well, but, you know, it was the Civil War, or just after the Civil War, like, it's a different time.
Yeah, I mean, like, they literally read out the... Is it them storming Normandy, or is it them leaving Dunkirk that they read out in the newspaper?
I think Normandy.
You think Normandy? Yeah, I couldn't tell, because obviously, like, to read it out, and, like, it sounds like the American forces are with them, which would imply that, like, it's the Europeans kind of, like, coming back into Europe.
Yeah, and you see him, like, brutally murdering that boy in front of his father for having communist propaganda, and it's a real rough time, man. Vidal fucking sucks. So, yeah, Ophelia descends down this spiral staircase in this, like, stone labyrinth that just happens to be next to the house, and she meets this fawn character who declares that she is the daughter of the king of the underworld, as seen in the opening, like, little animation, and that she must complete 3 tasks before the moon is full to, like, regain her immortality or whatever. So, this is a just full-on Del Toro puppet animatronic CGI monster character. Like, between the fawn and the pale man, it's like, these are the most Del Toro-y type movie monsters I think that there are.
Yeah, I think that they're the 2 iconic ones. I even think the pale man is a little bit more iconic than the fawn.
I think so. Yeah. That's like the thing that everyone, like, when you see the 5-second clip that goes with this movie, it's the pale man putting the eyes in up to his hand. Yeah. But yeah, you've got poor Doug Jones in this giant suit, which he said was like the nicest suit he's ever worn because of how they built it. But, you know, he's in this giant suit. He doesn't speak a word of Spanish. He signs on to do the movie. Del Toro's like, you know, I won't make it without you. Only you can do this. And he gives him a script in English. He's like, yeah, great. And then it's like, oh, we're going to shoot in Spanish. He's like, I don't speak Spanish. And then he spends countless hours learning his own lines in Spanish, learning Ophelia's lines in Spanish so he knows when to speak. And then Del Toro at the last minute just has him overdubbed by the narrator, Pablo Adan. So... yeah,
it does work, because obviously, like, the mouth movements have to match up. But
yes,
he does make it up in Hellboy 2, because obviously Hellboy 1, he's overvoiced by David Hyde Pierce.
Yeah, he was.
And even in Fantastic Four, he's overdubbed by Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah, and then Hellboy 2, finally, Abe Sapien gets to have Doug Jones's voice.
Poor Dougie Jones. Like, the actor behind so many, I wouldn't call Silver Surfer iconic, but, you know, big recognisable characters, and no one fucking knows who he is.
Yeah, and obviously he comes back into Shape of Water again, where he plays the Amphibian Man, but even, like, that character does not speak.
But yeah, this is a great little scene. Like, it's that, Del Toro, clearly, you know, his obsession with this sort of the darker side of fairy tales and stuff, and, like, I think I spent the entire first viewing of the movie waiting for the reveal that the fawn is evil, you know, like, just because of the way
I think that's what I really like about it, is he seems quite malevolent, but the movie never quite does anything. In fact, like, there's a point later on in the movie where you go, like, no, I completely understand why the fawn's acting a bit angry. Like, he's completely justified in his anger right now.
Don't eat anything, Jesus Christ.
This scene, like, obviously this movie won a whole mess of Oscars. It won art direction, makeup, both of which, like, are fully on point in this scene. The sound design is really good. Like, the sounds that the fawn makes when he, like, kind of, like, clicks around is just...
yeah, he, like, creaks a bit, doesn't it?
It's like he's made of wood.
Exactly, yeah. And I really like the writing of... he says, like, he's had many names only the wind and the trees can pronounce. It's like, that's... fuck you, Guillermo. I can't write anything that good. It's just really good. So the first of these tasks is to put 3 magic stones into a giant toad's mouth and then take out a key. So she goes crawling through this, you know, she has to find the big tree, which is the tree on the poster, and, like, crawl through all this bug-infested mud and find this giant toad and trick it into eating the stones instead of some bugs, which kills it, which the fawn left out, and she takes the key. So this this is gross as fuck. Like, I get, like, not just is she a great actress, it's like she seems really game to do the really gross and scary stuff as well. Like,
yeah, I adore how randomly muddy she gets. Like, each time they cut back to her when she's crawling through it, like, she's just muddy in a completely different way that's like, how have you done this?
I think it's like the pill bugs or whatever are like crawling up her arm and making her...
And she's like wiping them off and stuff like that, but yeah.
So he originally wanted to have all these tunnels lead through to like a giant domed area, but then he was like, but then the toad doesn't look big. Fuck it, we're building a tiny set, and they had to do it in like 2 days. But yeah,
the bit where the toad like coughs up its entire like digestive system, and it's just orange and coated in flies, and its skin deflates. Again, this movie looks gorgeous,
but it's also gross.
It's also gross, but it looks amazing. Like, for a movie that's made as cheaply as it is, for the practical effects, and even though the toad is very obviously CGI, like, it's still one of those things where like it holds up.
Yeah.
It's also one of those things where like my favourite thing is like she's kind of a bit dumb.
She is a bit.
We kind of skipped over this bit, but like when she first kind of like finds the fairy and she sees this bug and she's like, oh, it's a fairy, and you're like,
is it though?
Is it though? And then like it transfigures itself into a fairy based on her picture book. But the fact that like her first reaction is, oh yeah, it's a fairy, and then like,
hey man, she's lived a very simple life.
Like, but also that she decides not to take off this very nice dress that her mother has bought her.
No, yeah, she does. She
takes it off. She takes it off outside, but not like, I'm going to go traipsing off into the woods. I'm going to wear this very nice dress out into the woods.
Yeah. Guillermo del Toro performed all of the toad noises, so that's how you save some money there on a voice actor, and good on him for being so good at that. So as we said, yeah, she hangs up the dress outside to avoid ruining it ahead of because Vidal is throwing a dinner party. And, she was given this dress for the party, but despite these efforts, I mean, it was going to be ruined anyway, because she comes outside covered in mud, and it's like, how are you going to touch this thing? But yeah, it, like, blows off the branch and, like, gets, like, draped in mud and rain and everything, so yeah, it's ruined. She gets back, and her mother sends her to bed without any food, but she does end up sneaking off to get her next task from the fawn. So, the big focus of the movie and what we're talking about now is the fantastical elements, but it feels weird to call it the backdrop, because it is actually, if you look at the runtime of the movie, I think it's got to be about 50-50, if not more, the realism stuff. But, this horrible narrative of these Spanish rebels trying to, fight against Vidal, and you get all this stuff with them, like, cutting the rations, but then declaring the rebels to be vermin and stuff like that, and he's giving his whole speech about how, like, oh, everyone's not created equal, and
yeah, like, that's one of those like horrible lines where it's just like, the issue is if they run the country, they'll make everyone think they're equal, and it's like, oh god, you're nuts. And even like when they are giving out the rations later, and there's the guy walking up and down giving people bread and saying like,
it's like, no one goes hungry in Spain, everyone's got bread. It's like, okay,
and then we see how nice the meal is, and like that they're having, and even then, like, because the man and the father that he kills with the bottle,
it's so brutal when he does that, like, smashing his face in, like, it's
so brutal. And then he just carries on going through the bag after he's killed both of them and pulls out the rabbits that they said they were hunting, and then goes like, oh, it's your fault I killed them, this is on you just didn't search his bag properly enough.
He's the worst. He's the fucking worst. You also get these scenes with, like, so the character of Mercedes, who's, I guess she's the housekeeper, or some kind of assistant or servant to Vidal, and this doctor, they're both assisting the rebels, which is something, we know long before he does. I think they're both really good. It's just they kind of have to pick their spots in between, like, the big scenes in the movie kind of thing. They certainly will get their scenes later on, but
yeah, she almost would have been in 2 of our picks for the movies that we would have discussed.
Oh really? What's she in?
She's she's Louisa in Y tu mamá también. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Maribel Verdú is really good in both of those.
Yeah. She totally overshadows Ophelia's mother.
Oh, 100%. Like, it feels weird that by the end of the movie you're kind of like so much more on board with their relationship.
Yeah.
Even though their relationship is founded in like a day.
Yeah, and it's just like, I just feel sorry for you, child. Like, I'm surprised that Ophelia kind of gets away with it as lightly as being sent to bed early with no food. Like, I was expecting like Vidal to see her and like, like hit the mother or some shit. I don't know, but yeah, it's.
Well, that's what I quite like, that he is quite hands off. Like, he doesn't give a shit about this woman and child that he's brought up here. He only cares about the fact that she's going to give the baby. Like, 'cause even then, like, the mother's the one who made the dress. Like, he doesn't care about the dress.
No.
Like, he hasn't paid money for it.
No, she sneaks off back down the labyrinth to talk to the faun again, and so there's this big sort of stone tablet in the middle, and the faun remarks that, oh, that's me and that's you on this stone pillar, and she's like, who's the baby? And he just deflects the question, and of course it will come up at the end, but it's like, okay, so you've got your foreshadowing right there, and I wonder if you like pause the scene and like can see that tablet well enough, you might even be able to see what is supposed to happen at the end. But yeah, so Ophelia's mother suffers some bleeding, and the two are made to sleep in separate rooms because the doctor feels like she needs to just be resting like all the time. So, you know, because of this, Ophelia obviously gets quite distracted from her 3 tasks. So the faun appears to her in her room and, you know, scolds her for not having completed the task and that kind of stuff. But then he does give her the means to, you know, he says, you know, here's a mandrake root, put it under her bed, give it milk, give it blood, and she'll get better. And it's like, okay, cool. It does ostensibly work, because I mean, you know, a big part of it is all of this in Ophelia's head, or is it real? And it's like, Del Toro is like, no, it's all real. I think if you look throughout the movie, it's very clear it's real. And, you know, the stuff that happens with her mother kind of hints towards that, because like when Ophelia's reading the magic book that like is going to give her tasks or whatever, there's like the page fills with red, and then immediately her mother starts bleeding. It's like, okay.
But it's all, like, I mean, spoilers for later on in the movie, when the magic root gets burnt, like immediately her mother kind of like falls over in pain. But then you've also got things, and the one thing is like later on, only one character could possibly see the faun in the movie, and they just see Ophelia talking to herself, which is one of those things where it's like even at that point the movie kind of like presents it as being like, ooh, is this something that only children can see? That kind of like fairy tale thing of she's innocent, so therefore she can see. Yeah,
he's too evil of heart or something, because you do in that scene hear the faun, but Vidal can't see it, but he also doesn't react to the voice, and it's like, does that mean he can't hear it? Or is he just not really responding in a like, huh? Hey? Like, yeah, it is left ambiguous, but yeah. The second task,
this is the iconic one.
Yes, it is.
Like if you see a still from this movie, it is from this task.
Yes. So she is given some magic chalk, and she is to draw a doorway, which will let her enter a strange banquet hall and obtain a dagger. And she is given very strict instructions not to eat anything. However, she eats 2 grapes, and the pale man wakes up, and she narrowly gets away. Now, this is definitely the iconic creature design for the whole movie. How this actress was not terrified to do this scene. Like, I'm sure she became very good friends with Doug Jones doing all these scenes with him, but even so, just seeing him sitting there in the full costume in this big room, I don't know how. I mean, maybe she was freaked out the first time she saw it and she just got over it, but yeah, it's so creepy, even before he begins moving. Just him sitting there and ugh.
It's a fantastic design. The fact that the room is surrounded by pictures of the pale man murdering children is just fantastic.
Stephen King sat next to Del Toro at a screening of this movie, and Del Toro said that seeing his reaction being so like squirmy was worth more than any Oscar could be. So I like that. So the piles of shoes in the corner, I don't know if it was on purpose, but to me, I immediately went to like Holocaust like symbolism, and like knowing this is set during World War II and stuff. It's like, I don't know if that is what they were going for, but that's immediately
this movie is packed with kind of allusions to different things. Like I was texting you whilst watching the movie that her dress very much reminds me of kind of like a color inverted version of Alice in Wonderland's dress from the Disney movie, and obviously, like you mentioned, Chronicles of Narnia and the faun. Like he's pulling a lot from kind of like fairy tale imagery for this.
Yeah, I think he wanted her dressed in green because it's, you know, the colour of nature and Pan and yeah, all the stuff that's happening. But I think it very much probably is inspired by Alice in Wonderland, her outfit. But another thing that the pale man is alluding to is it is a critique of the Catholic Church by his own admission, because what do you have? You have a banquet untouched, and then you have children that have been devoured. And then there's stigmata, obviously, with the eyes. This is also, like, I don't know if he actually took the inspiration from it, but there are definitely, like, Japanese demon folklore things with, like, creatures that have their eyes in their hands kind of thing. But, yeah, when he wakes up and, like, you know, puts the eyes in and puts them up to his face, it's like, oh my god, This is so creepy. What is the rating for this movie? Because
I think it's a 15.
Okay, because they had to actually give warnings to children in Spain, to families in Spain, because people were taking kids to go see it, and it's like, no, you don't want to do that. Because I mean, it's like, you know, when he's biting the heads off the fairies and stuff, and it's just like they burst, and it's like, ew.
Yeah, they burst, and like these are gifts from the fawn, where the fawn's just like, these are going to help you, and like they were like waving at her to go like, no, don't eat the fucking grapes, don't eat them.
But of course, she's starving from being sent to bed with no food. So.
Yeah. But what I also really enjoy is they're not quite helpful.
No, they are a little bit. Yeah, like I know what you mean. Yeah.
The whole point is like they're testing her, and so like they go and they point to a lock that she has to open with the key that she got from within the frog, but she's kind of like, no, this isn't the one that I need to do. It's this one is the one that you want me to do, and we don't find out what terrible thing would have happened if she hadn't done it. But it is like they are. It's that kind of like creeping thing where like, are they actually trying to help her, or are they trying to do something?
Well, if you consider what the last task is, I would imagine it is they're trying to do something.
Yeah,
and she has to like draw a new hatch, because there's also like, you know, she has to get in and out before this hourglass expires, but then she has to draw a new exit, and she does get away. But I think a lot of people are like, we need to explore this pale man and what the hell's going on here in a whole side thing, and maybe would have been part of the sequel. Maybe this was always intended to just be like no different from the Toad, it's just that people latched onto it more and it took on a life of its own. But yeah, it's certainly like the image, even if it, you know, it's a 5-minute scene, maybe less.
So this scene is probably the one that makes me think most of how gorgeous the movie is. Guillermo Navarro is the person who did the cinematography for this movie. More than deservedly won the Academy Award for cinematography. Yeah, this entire movie is gorgeous.
Yeah, and the set of the banquet as well is really good.
Yeah.
Like the candlelit stone hallways and stuff. Yeah, creepy shit.
Yeah, like he's done a lot of movies, but he's also gone on to do a lot of kind of like TV show directing now. He did a lot of Hannibal, and Hannibal looks great. He did one episode of Luke Cage of all shows.
Oh,
yeah.
I'll look into that later, but yeah. Some of Luke Cage looks really good. So, back in the quote-unquote real world, the rebels create a big distraction so that they can raid Vidal's food supplies, because that's the thing throughout, like, right from the beginning, like, I think almost the first scene. There's this giant padlocked sort of, like, food shed, and Mercedes gives Vidal the only key, but yeah, and, you know, they're giving out only a tiny amount of it to the locals, whereas they're feasting. And they create this big distraction and raid the supplies, and a furious Vidal and his men just slaughter anyone who wasn't quick enough to get away, and they capture... It's not Mercedes' brother, he's the one that comes later, isn't it? It's just like...
they capture the stutterer.
Yeah, the stuttering man. They torture him to the brink of death.
The only thing you see is like his face is swollen up and his eyes are like almost closed. They've broken his hand in so many different places.
Well, they're like... He shows them all the different implements. He's like, so you're going to say things and I'm not going to believe you. This one here, I might start to trust you. By the time I get to this one here, I'm going to believe everything you say. And it's like, And even in this scene where like they're tearing through them up the hills, it's just really violent. Like, this is a man of incredible violence.
But even then, I quite appreciate the movie doesn't do a lot of the torture.
No. It's all mostly done in implication and sort of...
Yeah, like you get the scene where he kind of goes to this guy and says, like, if you can count to 3 without stuttering, I'll let you go. Mm-hmm. Kind of like reinforcing how much of a shit he is, and he doesn't make it, and then the scene cuts away just as he, like, slams the hammer into his head. The other thing I really like about the Rebels is that, like, it's seemingly everyone but the soldiers like them, because like the doctor has been smuggling antibiotics up to them for the guy who's been shot, which obviously is going to come up very soon, and obviously Mercedes' brother is one of them, and people are sending letters through her to the rebels. It's very much is like everyone who can't fight is kind of like keeping quiet, but they all support what the rebels are doing.
Well, I mean, fascism, man. Del Toro, like, obviously I think his first love is like grimdark fairy tales, but I think he also does, I don't want to say he likes it, but he has an affinity for, like, very cruel men. The brutality of Vidal is...
Yes, like Vidal is very similar to Michael Shannon's character in Shape of Water.
Yeah, I think he's very good at crafting these, like, just horrible, horrible men that you are scared are going to get away with all of it, or, like, win when you think they shouldn't, kind of thing.
Yes.
So, yeah, the Fawn tells Ophelia she's broken the rules, she can never return to the underworld, and she will live and die as a human, and all of them will fade away, and very scorning. And this is, again, where, like, on a first watch, I was like, he's clearly tricking her, like, he wants her to do something bad, but then also also I think he's very into this idea that, like, you know, darkness isn't always darkness, and what things that seem bad actually aren't. And the idea that, like, you know, she's, I don't want to say she's kind of stupid, but, you know, if among his instructions he went out of his way to say don't eat anything, and then it's like, right, you had it. This was actually overwhelmingly easy, if not for the creepy man in the corner that you can just ignore.
Yeah, you didn't seem particularly, like, put away from him. You picked up his eyes and you didn't do anything.
Yeah, eat his eyes. Ugh, don't do that. But yeah, it's like, you know, you see the fawn takes the slightly darker turn and, like, scolds her and everything. And it's also like, oh, so he can just appear to her in her room as well. Like, Vidal, you know, he gets finished torturing the rebel, and then the doctor euthanizes them because it's like, you know, you are not going to get out of this, but I can give you a pain-free escape. Vidal sort of puts it all together that the doctor is working with the rebels. He, like, finds the medicine in the bag and everything. And it matches what they recovered up in the hills. So he murders the doctor, and
the doctor's last stand is terrific.
Yes, that is a hell of a scene for him when he's saying, like, you know, only people like you can blindly follow orders, and, like, walking away from him, knowing what's going to happen.
But he just kind of walks out. He keeps his dignity, and the doctor is so blinded by just being told to his face that, like, you are not a good human or whatever, and killing the person who could potentially save his wife, because obviously at the exact same moment as this is...
He discovers the mandrake root and is like, this is fucking gross and stupid, and what are you doing? And it's almost like, oh, the rebel's going to get away with it because he's going to be distracted by Ophelia, but that's not what happens, because he fucks off, and then Ophelia's mother burns the mandrake. And then the second that... I mean, does Ophelia see it and hear it, like, screaming in the fire and moving?
She hears it screaming, but I don't think the mother does, because I think the mother immediately, the moment it starts screaming, she's coiled over and holding her stomach and stuff like that.
And she delivers the baby prematurely and dies from childbirth. And it's like, Ophelia, your life is not a good life, I'm sorry. But yeah, they, you know, Vidal gives her the funeral and everything, and is holding the baby at the funeral and whatever, but it's sad. But Vidal makes it clear he suspects Mercedes as well. I think he's pretty stupid to have not suspected her earlier, but he's sort of toying with her at this point, because he's sort of, like, asking her to her face, like, and I had the only copy, even though the lock wasn't forced. Okay. And then I lets her go, and then she attempts to flee with Ophelia, but she is quickly caught. She does manage to escape torture and mutilate Vidal, and then the rebels come and like, get her away from the few soldiers that give her chase. And in this little torture scene, you know, you get the would-be torture scene. He's making the comments about, oh, she's just a woman, and
yeah, because on top of everything else, he's sexist.
Well, yeah, I don't want to say the least of his crimes, but, you know, yeah, of course he is, of course, also sexist. But it means he's left alone with her, whereas, like, I think some of his men were there while he tortured the other rebel, but he's very much like, oh, you can leave me with her, she's just a woman. And then she, of course, fires back with, like, that's how I got away with this. Yeah. He does acknowledge pride is his fault, fault.
I mean, and it's how she gets away with it again, because they don't search her for weapons.
Exactly. And because we see that close up twice of her, like, folding the knife up into her frock or whatever. So it's like encoding it in your head that's there. And it's a really brutal moment. I don't know, it's like, on the one hand, it's like, you should have killed him, but also it's like, that was dark fucking stuff. Like, she's shoving the shoving the knife in his mouth and giving him the Joker smile. Like,
yeah, the thing is, like, he's not going to survive, really, because he doesn't get any medical treatment.
No, and he's killed the doctor, so...
Yeah, he's killed the doctor. He's not going to get any medical treatment. He's been stabbed just above the heart, it would appear, and had probably his tendons in one arm completely ripped out. And then
he's covered in blood, and
he's covered in blood, which makes it the kind of chase that happens in a moment when he goes back to the room and keeps doing shots of alcohol, even though his mouth's been cut open.
Yeah, like,
and
you
kind
see
of
him
wincing.
Stitch the mouth, and, like, I don't know how they did that. I mean,
yeah, what a terrific piece of kind of, like, is it CGI? Is it makeup? It's just really good.
It's just this clean, broken skin of just, like, his mouth is wider than it should be right now. And, like, seeing him stitch it up and then bleeding through the bandage the second he drinks, and it's like, yeah, you're fucked, man. You need
and then his immediate response is to have a second shot immediately after that. I mean, all whilst this, Ophelia's trying to steal her brother.
Yes. So the fawn comes to Ophelia and is like, I'll give you one more chance. And she promises to do exactly as asked this time, which you know, if you know anything of, you know, sort of Greek tragic fairy tales and Greek tragic myths, and I don't know, just the warning signs start going off when someone's like, but this time you must do exactly as I tell you. It's like, he's going to ask you to do something you're not going to like, or he wouldn't have said that. So she is tasked with bringing her new brother down to the Labyrinth, and, you know, she does steal it. She does, you know, sneak into Vidal's chambers and, like, you know, manage to get her brother and run away. And, like, you see Vidal, like, finds the chalk in the room, and he, of course, immediately crushes it because it's all he knows how to do is destroy things. You know, where she is, like, enchanted by it and takes good care of it, he just crushes it in his hand without even thinking about it. And, like, he's about to catch her, but the rebels do come back to attack again. Because Mercedes wants to come back for Ophelia, and it's like the irony of, like, Ophelia's already gonna get away maybe, but then you guys coming back, she does run away. And you get this final task and the sort of climax of the movie of, like, you know, Vidal chases her into the labyrinth,
like staggering along because he's done 2 shots of whiskey or whatever, and he's lost a lot of blood, so he's not fully of his right mind.
Yes, because he does, like, almost get her right there and then, and it's like, well, you're fucked. But he like staggers on over a little bit, and it's like, oh, did she poison? No, he's just drunk and very low on blood. Yeah, so he chases her into the middle while, like, the rebels are fighting everywhere, and they get, you know, she gets to the middle of the labyrinth again, and the faun says, only the blood of an innocent will like open the portal. And the strong implication of, like, you got a key that gets a special knife that is used to, you must kill your baby, the baby. And she, of course, is like, absolutely not, I'm not handing my brother over. But then Vidal arrives as she's having this sort of argument with the faun. He has to take a longer route because the whole Harry Potter 4 thing of, like, the maze is, like, closing paths off and stuff like that. But yeah, he gets there and he snatches his son back.
He does kill the spare as well.
Yes, he does kill the spare. Nice. Who goes on to be Batman, so he wins. Yeah, he shoots Ophelia, and we see her blood trickling down into the, like, you know, down the spiral stairs or whatever. Yeah, I mean, we kind of already talked about it, but him getting there, and it's like, right, here's the moment of truth. Can Vidal see the faun? No, he can't. But as we said, like, we can still hear it, and is the implication he is invisible to someone like Vidal? Or is it just, you know, we're seeing a lot of this movie from Ophelia's point of view, so if it's real to her, it's real to us. Like, who knows? I mean, I think we all know that it is implied to have all been real, but if it is a better movie for you, if, like, this is all just a child trying to escape from, like, the grimmest of realities, then, hey, you've got that there for you if you want it.
I don't think it makes it a better movie reading it one way or the other. I just quite appreciate that the option is there for you to kind of, like, question the reality of this world.
That's what I mean. Like, if you are a person that, like, finds that to be a more poignant ending, it is good that is there for you. But equally, if you want to just buy the fantasy as 100% real, then that is there for you. So I think it does do a good job. I really like when Vidal, you know, exits the labyrinth, and then just all the rebels are there, and he knows he's dead, so he just hands his son over to Mercedes, and it's like, I don't know, on some level it's like you might expect him to try and use the baby as a human shield, or be like, let me go or I will kill the baby. But it's like, I don't want to say he has redeeming features, but you don't doubt that his son is incredibly important to him, but maybe not for a traditional loving reason, but more of like a, this is my legacy, because that's exactly what she does. She denies him that legacy by being like, I'm never even going to tell him your name, and then they kill him. Him finally being brought down, and it coming at the hands of these people whose lives he has made horrible and who he has talked down about, and him having that legacy torn away from him at the last moment as well. It's like, yeah, fuck you. But what I also quite enjoy is not about this, but just in terms of, like, because we then find out that she gets into the afterlife or the whatever it is, because call it like the realm of the
underworld,
the underground realm or something. It's like, I mean, are you saying hell? Are you saying the underworld? Like,
yeah. So she gets in, and they kind of, like, the faun comes out and says, like, you passed the final test because you didn't want to sacrifice your brother, which then kind of makes you go, like, what was the point of the 2 tasks then if you didn't need the knife to, like,
set it up to seem like that is what must happen, like the importance of this third test, and like, Yeah, like, and they very specifically, I mean, her father, the king, says very specifically, like, choosing to spill your own blood rather than that of an innocent is the true test of, like, does he say of, like, royalty or
it's something along those lines. It's just the other thing was, like, because obviously it seems quite apparent that, like, he isn't going to kill the baby, the fawn. If you believe that, like, this is where it's going to go, like, the fawn, because the fawn very blatantly goes, like, oh, it's just a pinprick, it's fine.
Yeah, he tries to sell it that way, yeah.
but from based on, like, how this plays out, it's like, well, the fawn's not going to just kill the baby, surely. The fawn will do the pinprick and go, well, you failed. You gave me the child.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, an equally dark ending. Just the child just goes off with the fawn, maybe, I don't know. Because we see that blood drop down, so the blood has been spilled, and it's like, another way would be Ophelia is an innocent, so they got the blood of an innocent after all, but then the king saying, like, spilling your own rather than an innocent is the true test. And it is the same actress playing her mother down here as her mother in the quote-unquote real world.
Yeah, which is one of those things where it's also kind of like, is it all real? Obviously, like, Guillermo says that it is, but it's one of those things where, like, she logically would imagine her mother.
Totally, and so that's how it works both ways. And yeah, Del Toro states it should be taken as real. And there are many clues throughout the movie that it should be. And he refers to when talking about this ending in particular, he cites Kierkegaard, who says the tyrant's reign ends with his death, but the martyr's reign starts with his death. And how living forever by choosing how you die and all this sort of stuff. And like the biggest thing that thematically links the two, the supernatural side with the Civil War, or it's not, I mean, Civil War's over, but the rebellion story is the importance of having the courage to rebel. And like throughout all of this, the rebels are our good guys fighting against Vidal and his men. Like the Doctor was rebellious and he chose his good death, and Mercedes defied him. But then Ophelia throughout all of her tasks has been rebellious. Like she didn't do exactly as she was told in the Pale Man task. And the final task, she essentially had to just say no. And yeah, that is what he's going for with this, dual narrative, I guess. And there's talk of like doing a third movie, like not necessarily a Pan's Labyrinth sequel, but like a third Spanish Civil War supernatural movie. And I think that's just something that he likes to explore throughout his career of like, having the courage to like stand up to bullies and stuff. You do see Ophelia die. She smiles and then ostensibly dies.
The light goes out in her eyes, which is astounding for an actress who's only 11 years old when she was filming this.
Yeah, and it's like, this is either to you, when people are close to death, their brain just is flooded with chemicals that makes them experience all kinds of things, and like, this is the end of her fantasy, and then she dies, or she is like, her soul or spirit is crossing over, and then her mortal vessel is gone, but she's fine down there. It's like, take it how you want. But that is the end of the movie, and yeah,
What is your hang-up?
I think, like, I understand it. Like, I'm going to say something and you're just going to immediately be like, but this. On some level, I kind of wish he either made a full-on fucking fantasy movie or a full-on fucking war movie. And I kind of think that neither gets quite enough time. But I do understand that they are supposed to be intrinsically linked in that way.
I think that fully works for me. Is that kind of like interplay between the two of them, this kind of like child's fantasy surrounded by this awful circumstance, and it's not so much an escapist thing, but it's like the two things are kind of intertwined in how the war narrative is kind of like taken apart from this fairy tale kind of like structure of you need to do 3 tasks where there are rules and life is structured, and then this just beautiful chaos of what's going on in the rebellion where like people are being murdered for no other reason than they can't. And I think that's the kind of thing where like we know how a fairy tale structure works, and the movie still obeys all the rules of how that narrative works. Like 3 tasks, we know that she's gonna probably kind of like win in the end, but it's gonna be a little bit dark as it goes on, versus,
and also like if you do this, then a good outcome will be yours, whereas in that grim reality of life, you can do all the right things and still be murdered with a bottle.
No, exactly. And I think the two things kind of like work really beautifully together, but I can also understand why you'd want more of one or the other.
I do think there are... I almost feel like the fantasy stuff doesn't have enough room. I feel that the war thing is pretty much fully achieved. But I kind of wish like there was a little bit more with the Pale Man, maybe a little bit more with the frog, the toad. I don't know.
I think it just helps to make it a really tight movie where like it doesn't spend too much time with them, and
also potentially some of it is budget.
Yes, potentially, but also it lets it stay in your memory more. The Pale Man wouldn't be as iconic if there was like the flashback sequence to what the Pale Man does, and the Pale Man's like ripping the entrails out of small children and stuff like that, rather than just her seeing some stone carvings on the walls.
Yeah. And then equally, I've seen him do like a full-on fantasy movie. I've seen Hellboy. I've seen Shape of Water. I mean, Shape of Water does... Oh no, that's a full fantasy movie, and neither of those are as good as this. So I guess my complaints are none. I think it's just more that like I acknowledge this is very good, but that's it for me. You know, like
I think you do have a fundamental kind of like disconnect with Guillermo del Toro's style.
Yeah, it's cool that someone like this is out there making something just so deliberately different to what we are used to seeing, and that like this is very much his aesthetic, and it's very cool that he's out there making it. It's not something that I'm like massively emotionally attached to as an unfeeling cyborg man. No,
yeah,
it's just,
like the fact you're coming away and going like, I'm not a huge fan of Hellboy 1 and Hellboy 2. I'm not a huge fan of Blade 2.
I think they're good. Hellboy 1 and 2 are a lot better than Blade 2. I was going to say that. Yeah, I think Hellboy 1 and 2 are like only a couple of scenes away from being really, really good movies. I think there's a lot of great stuff in both of them, but then this is, I think, clearly better than anything else he's done.
Yeah, I think this is my favourite of his movies.
Yeah.
And I think it works beautifully. I think it's a gorgeous looking movie. I'm deeply disappointed it didn't win Best Foreign Film at the Oscars. I mean, like the lives of others is fantastic, but I feel like Pan's Labyrinth has had that pop culture bleed that you don't get very often from foreign language movies.
Oh yeah, it's like, you know, when talking about like X number of films to see before you die, and like this is the like how-to guide for being like a film person. like you see this movie crop up everywhere, and it is a strong favourite for a lot of people who operate in this space, and like I get it, it's not hitting me that same way it is hitting other people, but like I can't deny it's like a fantastically well made film, and yeah, it's very good stuff. I'm glad it's on the list. I wouldn't try and argue it off the list. It's just not one that I would be like, oh my god, and Pan's Labyrinth. But, you know, that's true of several films that are on here. But I still think, you know, objectively, they deserve their place on here. And
yes,
it's the highest reviewed movie we have on here, right?
I think so. I think I've got a little aggregate summary thing going on, and this is the only movie that cracks it into the 90s.
Oof.
We've got 2 88 movies coming up in the next batch of movies, which is the second highest batch of them, which you've only seen one of them, I think?
Yeah. Well, speaking of the next batch of movies, thank you for listening to this episode. Do go to intotherealworld.com, like, comment, subscribe, soundcloud.com/Mike and Matt. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we're on iTunes, you name it. But next week, we will be doing Sunshine, which is actually what we'll be doing next week, unlike last week when I thought we were doing it this week.
We're doing Sunshine, not Danny Boyle's Oscar-winning Slumdog Millionaire, because we want to be contrarian, and also we want to...
Chris Evans in space, man.
Yeah.
Who thought it would happen?
Yeah.
A movie that almost got bounced from the list many times, but has made it on, and I look forward to doing it as we try and justify keeping it on over.
I know, especially in terms of like we are about to start a 6-week stint in 2007.
Oh my good lord! Right, well, get ready for that. We're gonna go do the same. Ben's gonna go watch a movie about stripping. I'm gonna edit an episode of this podcast. Ben, before you see the strippers, are you able to confirm? Will there be movies?
I mean, I'm going to see a movie about strippers, so yes, there will be movies.
There's at least one movie, once again. Thank you, everyone.
There's at least one movie, and that movie is about strippers.
Just as the good Lord intended. Goodbye, everyone.
Still I didn't know.